Welcome, chasers, to the Chase Challenge Week 17. Last week, David was made king over the southern part of Judah. So he was not king over all of Israel at this point. His father-in-law, Saul, had died, but the house of Saul was continuing to reign over the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, last week, you got a snapshot of the future, a little preview of the future. And I will go ahead and tell you, even though David doesn't know this, I'm going to let you in on what happens during the kingdom era of the Israelite history. As you already know, Saul was the first king of Israel. This week, David is about to become the second king over all of Israel. This is the United Kingdom. Saul, David, and then David's son Solomon all reign during a united kingdom of Israel, except for this brief couple of years when the house of David and the house of Saul are at odds with each other. All right, that's just a little brief period of time, but overall, the kingdom under King Saul, King David, and King Solomon's reign is a united kingdom. After David's son Solomon dies, the kingdom divides. The southern kingdom is referred to as Judah. The northern kingdom is referred to as Israel. And we will follow over the next several weeks the lives of each one of the kings of both Judah and Israel. We will also come to know the prophets who speak into the lives of the kings. It's God trying to get the attention of these kings of Judah and Israel. But as we follow the kingdoms, we will see many of the kings, most of the kings, getting farther and farther away from knowing what God's law says and obeying it. Eventually, the kingdom of Assyria comes in and captures the northern kingdom of Israel. A couple hundred years later, the kingdom of Babylon takes over Assyria, and they capture the southern kingdom of Judah. The land that God had promised to Abraham many years ago is taken from the Israelites. And now they're living in the land of Babylon, and they are servants, they are slaves, they are captives, they are exiles. Now that is what is to come. A little picture that you got last week of what will happen in Israel's future. But where are we today? What does David know? And what is happening right now in our chronological reading? What's happening right now is that this week, David will become king over all of Israel, the northern tribes and the southern tribes. My question for you is, when the elders come from Israel to make David king over the whole land, what are the two reasons that they give for making David king? Number two, how many warriors of David were present when David was made king? And where did these warriors come from? Number three, shortly after David becomes king over all of Israel, he decides to move in and take a territory that is inhabited by the Jebusites. The Jebusites are living in this city. David takes it over, and it becomes known as the city of David. My question for you is, what are the other two names that this city is referred to? This is where David rules and reigns for the rest of his time as king over all of Israel. Now, there was one thing that David wanted more than anything. There was one thing that he desired more than anything, and that was the presence of God. Now, remember, during this time, where was God's presence found? In the Ark of the Covenant. No, not the boat ark that Noah sailed in, but the Ark of the Covenant that was described in detail when we were reading through Leviticus. The presence of God resided in the ark, and the ark was not in the city of David, and David wanted it there. because that's where God's presence was. And that's what he delighted in. That's what he found joy in. That's what he desired more than anything, was God's presence. So David proceeds to get the ark and move it to his city. But something tragic happens. What happens when David tries to move the ark? What is David's immediate reaction? And then contrast that to how he responds to what happens in the future. Does the tragedy that happened change David in any way? When the ark finally makes it to the city of David, how does David act when the ark enters the city? And how does his wife respond to how David's acting? David was a true chaser. He loved God. David was the epitome of a chaser, and he becomes like the gold-barred standard of a God chaser from here on out in all of Scripture. I really want you to notice how much time, effort, and expense David puts into making sure that God is worshiped in the way that God has prescribed to be worshiped, as told Moses many, many years prior. What kind of things, to what extent does David go to make sure that God is worshiped and pursued by himself and by the nation of Israel? David was a chaser. He was a pursuer of God's presence. It was a pursuit that superseded every other ambition in his life, because his joy, his peace, his satisfaction, his hope, everything lied in the presence of God. God's presence is the only place that these things can be found. So don't stop chasing. Keep chasing after the one who is chasing hard after you. Keep being a learner and keep discovering all the wonderful truths he has for you to know today and this year. I'll see you next week.